Today I'll be sharing with you my story of how I became an airline pilot at 23. First, let's talk about me growing up and how I actually got into aviation. I used to live near Heathrow, and all the time I used to go and watch the planes take off and land. That was my thing to do in the evenings after school. And from that moment I knew I always wanted to be a pilot. So when I was 16 I started attending open days for different flight schools and started learning about the path to become a pilot. And then when school finished at 18 I started the selection process with the two biggest flight schools in the UK, which were L3 and CAE. And then just before my 19th birthday I was accepted onto the integrated ATPL course with L3. So then I started flight training in September 2018, and this started with ground school. So when I was doing my ATPL exams, there was actually 14 exams, now they've lowered it down to 13, and I did the EASA exams because it was before Brexit. So ground school took about 6 months, so I finished in March 2019, and that is one of the best days. You'll remember that day forever, finishing your ATPL exams. And then I got sent to the other side of the planet, to New Zealand, to do my basic flying. So this was the first time I actually got into light aircraft with an instructor and was taught how to fly. And then after about 15 lessons I was able to go solo, and that was one of the coolest experiences ever, being in the plane by yourself. And then with VFR flying I got to do so many cool flights in New Zealand. I got to go to some of the volcanoes, I got to go up to Auckland, do a loop around the Sky Tower and just exploring New Zealand, which was so cool. And then unfortunately the pandemic hit, so I came back to the UK and then finished all of basic flying in the UK, and it is night and day difference between flying in New Zealand and flying in the UK, but it's good I got to experience both because I ended up doing my CPL in the UK, so I think the experience flying in the UK helped out a lot. So once I came back to the UK I managed to do my progress test for VFR flying, and then I got to move on to instrument flying. So then I started the advanced phase of my training, and that meant learning about VOR holds, NDBs, ILSs, and all the instruments we use to fly. And then in the advanced phase you also get to fly multi-engine aircraft. So you get to learn about engine failure after takeoff, single engine ILSs and single engine flying, which is really cool. And also getting to shut down an engine in flight and flying on one engine. So then after about 30 or so flights I managed to do my CPL in the UK, and I still remember where I went from Bournemouth up to near Bristol, and then we diverted to Exeter, did circuits at Exeter and then back into Bournemouth. So I managed to pass my CPL first time, and then it was on to the MEIR phase. And with the MEIR it's just a lot more of instrument flying. And then in around June 2021 I managed to get my instrument rating and I completed my ATPLs. I almost forgot about the APS MCC course which you have to do, and I did that on the 320 in around September 21. So I was completely done with flight training in September 2021. So unfortunately the job market was quite bad when I finished flight training due to COVID, and no airlines were hiring at that point, so I just had to wait it out. But luckily around September 2022 I managed to get an interview with EasyJet, passed that, and then I started my training. And then in February 2023 I started my type rating on the A320. So I finished my type rating in March 2023, and then I did my base training in April. And base training is one of the days you'll remember for life. You get to fly a jet for the first time, and I remember it was a perfect day out in a Châteauroux in the south of France, and we were just 5 or 6 of us just in an A319 doing circuits. So then once base training was done, I was put onto the line and started my line training. And line training was 50 sectors you have to do with a training captain. And then in June 2023 I finished my line training and I was released onto the line to fly with all the other captains. So that's my journey of how I became an airline pilot. Hope you found this video useful, and if you want to see more videos just let me know in the comments.